I think Irshad and I both believe in the power of stories. And that is why her website is proliferated with many stories of many moral, courageous people. And I want to just make the personal political and the personal theological and the personal ethical by telling you a couple of stories in my life where I have felt the need to be called into moral courage and to do a little bit then to talk about what I think that means. And we're going to interrupt each other and talk to each other back and forth. And I hope that Irshad will also tell us about her story. My first, I think, experience of moral courage was not my own. I'm African American, and my parents are both African American, and they are great grandchildren of slaves. They were both raised in Mississippi. My mom lived in Sunflower County, where Fannie Lou Hamer was an activist, both against lynching and also doing voters registration. So my mom's uncle, great Uncle George, was an activist with Fannie Lou Hamer, and they were registering people to vote down there in the Freedom Summer, when in Meridian, where my dad was born, all those students went down 50 years ago right now to do some voter canvassing and to start freedom schools so young black children could learn in better school systems than they were already inhabiting. But Uncle George did this work of voter registration despite being shot at, despite having a bomb placed near his house, despite the violence that was being threatened to him. So I think my heritage, my inheritance is of these morally courage black people in Mississippi who were doing this incredible work. My dad was in the Air Force when I was born. He was stationed in Morocco. But when he came back from having been across the world in another kind of theater and came back to the United States, he came back to Jim Crow that had leaked up north. You know, like they left Mississippi, but the Jim Crow had leaked up north into Omaha, Nebraska, even though they had left the South, and even though the Air Force was kind of a, let's say, legislated equality kind of place. He had some really tough encounters with guys who were, didn't have his rank, who refused to respect him. One man putting his foot up on his desk, another man really trying to egg him into a fight. But when I was a little girl in New Hampshire, when they were stationed in New Hampshire, it was the first time that I encountered my dad's courage standing up for me when in kindergarten, a little girl named Lisa came to rock my little multicultural world. Some of my congregation has heard this story already. Our little happy, well-adjusted little multicultural Air Force life, which meant me and a little black Japanese girl and a bunch of white children. But you know, it was cool. It was like, we are the world, we are the children. Everybody was getting along. I had two little boyfriends, both named Tommy, one blonde and one with red hair. It was working for us, this trio.
And apparently for them.
Exactly. Yeah. Little chocolate me and their red-haired, blonde-haired selves. You know, it was the days of, you know, Scooby-Doo or somebody on your lunchbox. Yeah. They would carry my lunchbox, Irshad, to the lunchroom and put my chair up on the table and get my little nap mat out for me. It was working really well until Lisa came to town. And Lisa was this blonde, pretty girl who came from Mississippi and brought with her her parents' Mississippi story. So we have an intersection of Mississippi stories.
You got competition now.
Honey, we got competition, and we have a competing narrative. We have, we are the world and we're all getting along, and we have, oh my goodness, you boys are sitting next to the girl that's black. And it was the first time I had really heard, or knew that I heard, the N-word. And she told them that they shouldn't be sitting next to me because I'm a nigger, and that my chocolate milk came from my mother's breast. Now, I think that bothered me more than the N-word comment. I was like, what? Because I loved chocolate milk. And I was like, what are you talking about? What's going on? What? I was deeply offended by that. And I used to tell this story without the back half of it because the back half of it kind of shames me a little bit. I have no idea where I heard it. No idea where I heard it. But when she called me the N-word, I went, white cracker, you don't shine. I bet you $5 I can beat you behind. What? I don't know where that came from. I don't even know if I knew what a cracker was. I know my parents didn't teach me that, because they were these black people from Mississippi who had left Mississippi to leave the racism, to leave the racing of us and them. They would spell, Irshad, they would spell the word white. Like, for example, that W-H-I-T-E man put his foot on my desk. I'm gonna have to stop him before I have to put my foot in his behind, like that. They, we could spell, we understood, but they would not. We were precocious, we were smart, but they did not want to talk about Chinese or Mexican.
They didn't want to become part of the problem.
They did not want to be a part of the problem, and they wanted to protect us and empower us. So my dad went to the base commander and demanded that man apologize to my dad and that girl apologize to me. Even demanded that I get invited to her birthday party, which I went to, but it wasn't that much fun. That was my first experience of kind of seeing courage at work, moral courage at work. My dad is a complicated dude, so I want to tell another story about him that prompted my moral courage. He's, okay, feisty. He's got a little temper. Will tell you exactly what he thinks. Like the Spanish people say, no tengo un pelo en la boca. I have no hair in my mouth. Did I say that right, John? No pelo, no tengo un pelo en la boca. Say it's good enough, John. Good enough, right? Good enough. I don't have any hair in my mouth. My dad has no hair in his mouth. He will speak it clearly, quickly, tersely. And I think we grew up afraid of him. He was a big, tall hero person who would toss us up in the air and splash water on us, but also he carried a big stick in terms of discipline and yes sir and no sir and that kind of thing. And so all of my life with Dad, I've been like, a little bit approach avoidance, be really, really good, be really, really good, and avoid the temper, avoid the anger, avoid the drama. And make decisions that you know will be supported by your father and your mother. So just make the peace. Well, then I fell in love with this guy named John Janka. And when Daddy...
W-H-I-T-E.
Yeah, white. Yeah. W-H-I-T-E, right? Yeah. And O-L-D-E-R than me.
You don't look it. He's doing fine.
He's kind of fine. And when Dad first met John, we were just friends. But it's like he smelled something or felt something brewing. So it's my PhD graduation, and it is my party, my PhD, and my dad is giving John giving him the butt. Like, I am not going to look at you. I am not going to talk to you. I'm going to walk around you. I'm going to ignore you. It was insane. Sometime during the course of the party, John walks to me and says, I'm leaving, because if I stay here, your dad and I are going to have words. Please don't go, please don't. I mean, you can imagine my reaction. I was really devastated by that. And he did leave. John did leave. Moral courage also. But it really prompted me to take my father on in ways, Irshad, that I had never, like, you don't take your father on when you're a black girl and your parents grow up from Mississippi. You don't be taking, I brought you in this world and I will take you out type of parents. You are not sassing, you are not talking back, you are not cutting your eyes, you are snapping to attention and saying, yes sir, no sir, 3 bags full, and that's that. Even though you're 45. But something had been shifting in me, and I want to get to that, but my whole theological frame had been shifting in my time in grad school and in my time in New York, and I was like, this kind of love that demands a kind of obedience that isn't gracious love, isn't really the kind of love I'm trying to live.
You stood up to your father's racism, let's call it what it is. It was racism.
Yes, it was.
In the way I think that Martin Luther King Jr. had to stand up to his father's racism.
Amen.
Did you learn from MLK's example, or did you find out about that example much later?
I have deep in my soul MLK examples about almost everything.
Yeah.
I would say his narrative has given me courage to find my own voice.
What's so interesting, Reverend Jacqui, and I want, on behalf of the assembled, to hear the outcome of your encounter with your father after the way he treated John.
Yeah.
So let's not forget to do that.
Okay.
In the meantime, what I find so interesting is that, when young Muslims tell me about their need for moral courage, and Anurag actually sits on an advisory team that I've pulled together to empower and equip young people all over the world with moral courage. He will attest, as I'm attesting now, that the most common dilemma that young people, and in this case young Muslims, express is, how do I tell my parents? Fill in the blank. It starts with family. I was in Indonesia about 3 years ago, and the very first question out of the mouth of many of the young Muslims who came to hear me speak was about family. I know where I stand, Irshad. I know what I stand for, but my family didn't sign up for this. What's my responsibility to them? What do I owe them? May I tell you what I advised?
I would love to know.
I said to them, don't give your family such short shrift. I'm not saying that your parents will change. I'm saying don't assume that they won't.
Right.
So many children of immigrants, of conservative folk, of African American folk, I think so many children, period, fail to see the humanity and the personal struggle of their parents. We live where we live. We are in the now. We are in our moment. And we often conclude, without any evidence, that our parents are not capable of moral courage in a deeply personal way.
Right.
I am a living example. The daughter of a mother who had real issues with me speaking truth to power 15 years ago, and who has taken a journey of her own, and now tells me, you go, girl. She does the finger snap, too. Where she got that, I don't know. What then was the outcome?
The most pivotal, heartbreaking, eye-opening experience of my life that has taught me so much about my dad's capacity and about my own capacity. When John left, I went to him and I said, Dad, that was really unacceptable what you did with John. And I'm quaking, I'm shaking. Sure. I cannot believe you did that. This is my party. And my dad's personality, he'll kind of cut you off and he'll say, and I'll tell you something else. We know that's his favorite connecting tissue. He says, I'll tell you something else. So you're not talking, I am, but I'll tell you something else. I'll tell you something else. No, Daddy, wait just a minute. Wait just a minute. Please let me finish, and then I'll listen to you. John is my friend. When I needed someone to make me spaghetti so I could work on my dissertation, he showed up. When I needed someone to read my chapters, he showed up. He is my friend, and you dissed him, and that's not acceptable. No, let me just finish. I said, Daddy, you and I have had incredible love in our life, and I adore you, and I respect you. But I promise you, this is the end of this behavior. If you ever again treat anyone in my life with that kind of disrespect, I'm going to come and do your funeral, and that will be that. And that will be that. And I said, I just want you to think about that. I just want you to think about that. And then I went out with my sister-in-law and got a little drunk, just to be honest.
Welcome to the problem with being Muslim,
yeah.
Even if you're a lousy one. What are we supposed to do?
I know. A little apple martini. So
Yeah.
To sort of fast forward, the next morning, my mom, who maybe like your mom used to cling in the back and hide, says, to him. You can tell she's done some work. We sit down and we have a really important conversation. And
She and your dad.
She and my dad had a talk
Yeah.
before I got home,
Got it.
clearly.
Got it.
The next morning, he says to me, we really need to talk about that. And I say, Daddy, I'm grown. And you didn't teach me to hate people. Where does that come from in you? You taught me that everyone was the same. You taught me to love my brothers and my sisters. You taught me that everyone has worth and dignity. What is this thing about John for you? Well, it turns out John reminded him of some particular white person in a particular place in Mississippi, and it was really difficult. Now, fast forward. We make peace that day, and I go, I love you. He's like, I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry. Wow. From my dad, the meanie. Yeah. I'm really sorry. And we went to see a play. Okay. This is not like happy ending in a minute, but this is happy ending over time. John and I went to visit them, and John and Dad sat in the backyard eating chicken and talking and telling their stories. And now, 10 years later, John and my dad are friends. And Dad says, you and John do more to heal racism in this country and around the globe than anybody I know, and he loves the hell out of John. It took 10 years of conversations, but it also took both of them being courageous enough, having moral courage enough. John to bend toward my dad, and he did, and to lean in and listen for his particularity, and my dad, courageous enough, morally courageous enough, to admit that he was wrong, and also to participate in the healing as a black man who has every right in his mind to stay angry.
And you mentioned it, but it's worth emphasizing your courage to, let's be honest again,
to
give your father no other choice.
Right, exactly. That's
Okay.
right. That's right.
And,
exegete that text, girl.
And that
Amen. Right.
And
Right.
it's not a formula.
No.
You know, we're talking about human relationships. And one of the things I've learned over the course of time, Reverend Jacqui, is that we don't change people by hectoring.
No.
We change, better said, transformation happens in relationship.
Amen. That's right. That's right.
And the upshot of that, which I try to teach my own students at NYU, and I'll tell you a little bit more about the context of that in just a second. Why do we assume so much about so-called others? Including, let me say, I think it's important to say it in a congregation like this, including rich people. Why do we assume that the so-called 1% is in the back pocket of the Republicans? Why do we assume? We do assume this, that if you're a Republican, you don't have much of a heart. That if you're a Republican, you really can't understand or won't understand justice.
You can't be a part of our movement.
You can't be a part of our
There's no
movement.
space for you.
That's right. In fact, again, let's go there, you're the enemy,
Yes.
okay?
Yep.
Not only are you not part of the movement, you're the problem.
Right.
When the reality is human beings are complicated. We are complex. And like your father did, we bring baggage to the table. What has made us what we are does not have to define what we can become.
That's exactly right.
Okay? And the same goes for me. You know, just because I happen not to be a Republican, by the way, I happen not to be a Democrat. I'm a Canadian citizen, and therefore I don't vote. How convenient. But just because I take a stand about something doesn't make me right. What it makes me is opinionated, and that's okay. What it can make me is judgmental,
Right.
and that's not
That's
okay.
not okay.
My opinion is my starting point, and I engage further because I might have something to learn from the so-called other.
Your
that
opinion.
will then
Yep.
allow
Right.
me
Right.
not just to grow, but also serve as a reminder for my reactionary kind of positions on other issues. In other words, I gain as much from engagement as I hope somebody else will.
I think that's right, Irshad. And I think one of the reasons that there's so much invested in our nation about separateness, Blacks stay away from whites. Rich stay away from poor. Muslims stay away from Jews, stay away from Christians, is because we kind of know intuitively that when we get together, we are actually going to change each other. We actually are going to change each other's stories.
That's a brilliant insight.
Our stories are not static. Our stories are not static.
That's right.
We are social beings. We want to connect with one another. We want to engage one another. And I think once we do, we are never the same.
And that's scary.
It's frightening.
That's scary.
We feel like we have so much to lose when in fact we have so much to gain. What do you think about that?
I'll tell you what I think. I think, and that's just my opinion, I think that many of us operate from a place of identity and assume that's a good thing, especially if you're a so-called minority. At least you know who you are. At least you know where you belong. But actually, identity is always highly emotional. It is attached to ego, which is why we have such a hard time changing our perception of ourselves. And you're absolutely right, I think, that engaging with the so-called other changes us, and that is very frightening. So one of the big distinctions I like to make when I teach moral courage is the distinction between identity, which is a set of roles that we are expected to play by those who wish to continue to play their roles in our lives, okay? Identity is a set of roles, but that's not the same as integrity.
That's right. Good.
Integrity is our wholeness, including our contradictions. And integrity is who we actually are, any one of us.
Right.
And we can't learn that on our own. We learn that with others. Can I give you an example? We love stories, you and I. People learn through stories. It's because of that truth that the Moral Courage Project, which is a program that I founded and run at New York University, and it's actually how Jacqui and I have come to know each other. Among other things, we've started a YouTube channel, Moral Courage TV, that tells the stories of everyday people, not celebrities, not heroes, everyday people around the world who are doing the right thing in the face of their fears. They're not fearless. They don't necessarily have the absence of fear because of God. They find a way to do the right thing despite their fear. And one of those stories I want to show you right now, it's a 3-4 minute video about a young woman named Nadia Manzoor, who is an improv artist here in New York. She was born in Pakistan, grew up in Britain, is now here, is a Muslim, identifies as a Muslim, questions that identity because of the injustice that she has witnessed in her own life in the name of that identity. And remember just a minute ago we were talking about how parents can change? I want you, if you're going to nod off during this video, please don't make it at the end. Wake up about a minute before the 4-minute video ends.
Beta, you look very beautiful when you are all covered up.
There is inherent social pressure in the culture and community that I grew up in to not be honest about who you are. And as a result, there are so many people who've either run away from their families or they live in fear of their families their whole life and then end up conforming to the status quo and not happy. I'm Nadia Manzoor, and I grew up in North London in a Pakistani Muslim community. My father enforced how important it was to maintain one sense of Muslim and Pakistani identity, being in a world of sinners. Anything that breaks that is considered a threat. Burkoff is an autobiographical one-woman show where I play all the characters.
Janu, one day you will make a man very, very happy.
If you don't cover your hair now, when you die, it'll strangle you in your grave. and you will die.
Even if some old goat was getting the willies from looking at my feet, why would I be sent to hell? Don't ask stupid questions! This shit would not be happening to me if I were English. You will never be accepted as British. Huh? Those people don't understand you. They don't understand us.
My peers are shocked that I am actually talking about these kind of things openly in public, because there is risk of losing friends and losing people in the community. But I think ultimately you have to ask yourself the question, what is most important to you? I want to be able to engage with young Muslims, engage with young non-Muslims about having the courage to challenge the people that we care about and that we love. I have a twin brother, and growing up, we were very, very close. And then we went to university and we met different groups of friends. His belief system became quite dogmatic.
Brothers, the westernization is the cause of our doom, yeah? No lies.
He started to see me as somebody who was betraying our roots because I had started to embrace white friends, basically, in a deeper way, and he hadn't. So when we would come home, it started to feel like I was with a stranger.
You don't even know who you are anymore. I mean, look at you. My sister is dead.
After one performance, my director came behind me and whispered in my ear, "Khurram's here, your brother's here," and I just burst out crying. I ran into the room backstage, and I sobbed my eyes out for a good 5 minutes. He came backstage, and we just held each other. The fact that he came to me was a big sign of his love and his support.
Beta, bus, enough.
I've really questioned and challenged my dad to think about the things that he followed. I felt like every time I performed the show, our relationship got a bit stronger because he was able to step back and really be proud of me having accomplished and achieved something on my own, in spite of the messaging that he had given me throughout my life. It's much easier to stay silent and not have to question and say anything, because if we do, then people are going to notice and people are going to point fingers, and it's a scary place to be. But I've gotten a deep sense of confidence around using my creativity for change. My name is Nadia, and I am Moral Courage.
This is, in many ways, the silent uprising of a new generation. And I know it's easy to just utter the words new generation as if that means something. But in this case, I think it does, because, Jacqui, not just in the United States, but all around the world, we are living at a time of mass migration. Not everybody, of course, is as lucky as Nadia's family has been to land on their feet. But these are children who are growing up in many ways as third culture kids.
Yep.
And are constantly having to negotiate boundaries and identities. And one of the things that worries me about the insularity that I witness in the United States, and by the way, I mean insularity among many African Americans and not just many WHIT people, is that the polarization between black and white, to which so many people are attached,
Yes.
to which their egos are attached, doesn't prepare a new generation for the reality beyond our shores and increasingly on our shores. And so my simple point in all of this, in showing Nadia's story, first of all, it affirms your point about the need to speak truth to power, to even those of us, as Nadia pointed out, to those of us whom we love and whom we care about. All the more, in fact, to whom we love and whom we care about, because we've got a stake in it.
Yeah.
But it is also to say that I really believe that in light of these tremors, and sometimes even earthquakes in how people are seeing themselves today, I think that we are very close to a time when many, many more of us will realize moral courage is the way out of of injustice. In other words, not polarization, but moral courage. Doing the right thing in the face of your fears. That's the point. Doing the right thing, everybody gets that. Somebody has her point of view about what is right. Somebody has his point of view about what is right. In the face of your fear, fear of being changed by the other, for example.
Fear of being rejected.
Fear of being rejected.
By the
fear
people
of
who love you.
backlash.
Right.
That is a heightened version of morality. That is where the sweet spot of moral courage is. And I fundamentally believe that a new generation is getting there. Not because of us, but in spite of us.
The situation, the Sitzumleben, the situation of our times is demanding that, requiring that. I look out in the congregation or the audience and I see lots of my young adults gathered here now, and I think they know the urgency of now in some way that is really important, and I think they have less, I don't think they have less fear, but I think they have less baggage. I think they have less, they're carting around less stuff about taking risks. I'm not, and let me tell you what I mean by that.
Yeah, because I want to push back on that for
Okay.
just a moment, but please go ahead.
Here's what I mean. I think that the parenting in the 80s that raised these young people was a little less rigid, and you're young people, so you are, but a little,
not quite,
a little less rigid than the parenting. Like our parenting was, you know, sit down, shut up, children are seen, not heard, this is what respect looks like. And that is a lot to carry around in terms of a moral courage moment. I think our young people who were raised with parents with a little more, let's ask a question. There's a culture of questioning. There's a way in which it's okay to express your opinion. That's a different kind of baggage. It's less baggage, not necessarily less fear.
And it can
but
come off as a sense of entitlement, can't it?
It certainly can. I wasn't going to say that part, but for me, it's inspiring. Yeah. There's a way in which. So I'm wanting to say, Irshad, what I hope is old people like me. I'm 55. I hope people who are boomers, and I hope people who are builders, and I hope millennials, and I hope Gen Xers. I hope all of us can, one, be inspired by the work you do, but also really believe in the power of the story to change the story.
Yep.
I want to talk a little bit about growing up then, so that you and I were talking about. But let me let you come back.
Can I just come back at you about one fear
Please.
that I observe among millennials about speaking their truths? And it has to do with how young people have been socialized to tolerate, even accept people who have different labels. That's a beautiful thing. But there's a problem. The problem is that a lot of young people today, and I experience this in the classroom, and I experience it in classrooms and learning spaces all over the world, young people today are afraid of asking the wrong questions. Okay?
So they're timid.
By which I mean questions that offend. And one of the points I try to make, I talk a lot about it in Allah, Liberty, and Love, my latest book, is that, diversity isn't just about your race and my religion and somebody else's gender and still somebody else's sexuality. Okay? Those are superficial differences. Diversity is also about differences of thought, of viewpoint, of opinion. And different people will naturally have different opinions about all kinds of things. And so here's the takeaway. Offense is not a problem to be avoided at any cost. I know this is hard to hear. And please challenge me during the Q&A if you feel the Spirit moves you to do so. Offense is not a problem to be avoided at any cost. Offense is the cost of honest diversity.
Oh, that's good. I agree with that.
And what we have to learn, because this is, I think, a nice segue to growing up.
Yeah.
We have to learn, all of us, to lower our emotional defenses about our identity and appreciate that there's a wholeness to be developed, and integration, integrity as an individual and integrity as a society to be developed by giving others a fair hearing. It doesn't mean you have to agree with them. Doesn't even mean that you can't push back on them. Quite the opposite. It means, once again, the willingness to engage, if only so that you can serve as a role model, so that they will engage you.
I think that's
And in the
really good.
process, somebody's going to change.
Yep.
But you got to be willing to accept. It might be you.
I think that's really so right, Irshad. And you know, I'm a psychologist, and one of the things that I think about every time you say identity, I think about Erik Erikson's,
Yeah.
you know, what's the 16-year-old project? That's almost like the 2-year-old project, but that whole idea of identity solidifying, or is it diffuse? And I think an American problem, or let's say a Western world problem especially, is the hunt for the concrete, not diffuse identity. Like, I am running forward to this is who I am, and this is my box in which I live. I am a gay, you know, Filipino woman, okay, or I am whatever that is.
Right,
And the structuring of that thing, the solidifying of that thing feels like it gives us safety.
Yeah.
And in fact, what it gives us is brittleness.
Yeah.
And the brittleness will break us. But the kind of porosity of boundary, the kind of less linear but circular, ongoing seeking of who I am, what you're calling wholeness. Right. And I love the way Brene Brown is calling it something like living a wholehearted life. Do I have that right? A wholehearted life. So that who I am is a seeker. Who I am is a questioner. I love that about you. Right. Who I am is a person willing to say, you know, no, not really, not for me. And to be willing to have my mind changed, and to be willing to have my heart enlarged. If that's our identity, and let's try to reframe that word then what we are is, I like to think about us as living texts. So now I'm a text, and I'm a narrative that is seeking to be whole, that is seeking to be cohesive, but I am nimble enough to have my story rewrit, you know,
Yeah,
and to be a
exactly.
part of the rewriting of the story. And you and I have talked about some of those stories, I think, that get us in trouble.
Yeah.
So this whole idea of like, and so I've got my gender story, and my sexual orientation story, I've got my God story, I've got our God stories are really problematic. Really problematic. Because they're the ones that often feel to us like there's no space for us to edit them. I'm thinking about some of the questions that came up in response to Marcus's talk. Like, what are the resources we have to, you know, do hymnody and to do liturgy that isn't reinforcing the 1, 2, 3, 4 story that Marcus talked about? What are the resources and the nimbleness we have to change the story, to let our God stories grow up? We grow up when our God stories grow up. So I've been thinking about how the church, the mosque, the synagogue create for us a God that doesn't allow us to mature.
And we're not allowing God to mature.
And we don't
if
allow-
we're not allowing us to mature.
Exactly. So there's this dynamic. My God is 7 years old. My God is kind of like the boogeyman. He's mean when I'm bad. He's nice when I'm good. That's not my God. I'm drawing, right? My 7-year-old concrete God is kind of like the boogeyman. I will get a spanking if I sin. I will get a present under my pillow. I'm mixing up all these gods. It's a two-fairy God. The God is a genie God. I rub God with my prayer beads, and all of my magic dreams will come true. What kind of nonsense is that? We don't have enough expansiveness about that. So then we're stuck. And then what we've got is two problems. One is, I think, sickness. So an immature God causes sickness. An immature God causes gay bashing. An immature God causes honor crimes. An immature God allows girls to be raped on a bus and thrown off the bus because they're less than human. An immature God authorizes racism and slavery. An immature God authorizes ridiculous greed and intense poverty. And somehow we didn't pray the right prayer, right? So there's a sickness. But worse than that right now for me is the way an immature God, a non-grown-up God, is a nammy-pammy, wimpy God. And in the Christian context, the nammy-pammy, wimpy God is not the Jesus who paid the price, is not the Jesus who, I'm not going to pull Marcus's up enough quickly, but the Jesus that I abhor is the punky, wimpy Jesus who's got wavy hair and a beatific look on his face, and he's got his fingers like this in all the paintings. And we made him up, and he is never going to take on the powers and principalities. He is never going to question the authorities. He is never going to have the temple tantrum that the real Jesus had. The nammy-pammy
Temple tantrum.
the
I'm
nammy,
taking that one from this conversation.
that wimpy Jesus is patient and kind and not jealous or boastful and doesn't insist on his own way. He bears all things and believes all things and hopes all things and just wait. Just you wait till we get to heaven. Just you wait till the pearly gates, invite us in. Just you wait till the streets are paved with gold.
The only life that matters is the life in the hereafter, is the
He's a wimp.
is the implication.
And I just don't believe it.
Yeah.
And I think it's a problem. So you and I have been talking a little bit about impatient love.
Yeah.
That love is not always patient and kind. God's love is patient and kind, but we're not God. And I think we need some impatient love that will stand up to our moms and dads, and impatient love that will stand up to our friends and say, actually, not on my watch. We're not going to behave that way, talk that way, live that way. An impatient love, an impatient God causes us to take risks, to boldly confront.
So I don't want to give mixed messages this afternoon about what moral courage requires of us. I'm asking you, Jacqui, if I've read part of your manuscript of your forthcoming book about grown-up God, and one of the passages of your book that jumps out at me is that love is not always patient and kind, especially when there is evil in the room. Okay? Now, here's the challenge, and I'm putting it at your doorstep to help us unravel this challenge. If we need to stand up to evil, but we also need to engage, how does that happen?
I think we have to not so much put the evil inside the person and put the evil inside the system.
There you go.
I'm not going to say that there aren't some evil people. I have met a couple of evil mofos. Okay, there are some evil people, but not largely. It's largely not that. It's
I'm with you on
largely good people
Caught in a
wrestling,
bad system.
caught in a bad system, caught in a system that needs to be redeemed, that needs to be restored. And I think if we can not personify, you are the devil,
Right.
you are the infidel, you are the one whose nails should be pulled out, but more like, let's get together, engage around what is broken around the system that we have the power to change. And you and I know that about our community organizing and one-on-ones, and really honest, courageous conversations help us to find the common enemy, if you will, that we can address. And that thing is often outside of us, but something that we have the power to dismantle and recreate.
Do you think, first of all, do you think that Occupy failed, number one? Yes. And do you think that if it did fail, I'm with you on that, I think it did too. Yes. I would argue that one of the reasons it failed is precisely that members, the most vocal members of the Occupy movement in various parts of the world, not just in New York City, demonized people.
Exactly.
And many of us, without necessarily being able to articulate it, being able to put language to it, many of us instinctively know by now that demonizing people doesn't change the system. In fact, it's part of what reinforces that which we despise about the system.
I think that's right on. And I don't want to, I'm loath to use this label that I'm going to use, and so I want to apologize, but I want to just make it antithetical to the word courage, that I think that demonizing is actually a cowardly act. I think it's a default position. And I think, in that way that we're part of the animal kingdom, we sometimes just need an enemy so we can feel like we're surviving.
Very primal.
Yeah, exactly.
Very
Base of the
primal.
brain. Let's
And
climb
lazy.
out and
Lazy.
it is. Well, okay.
It
So
is.
yeah,
It is lazy.
and I actually think it takes a lot more courage, a lot more moral courage to say, even though I don't understand you, I want to try. Even though I disagree with you, will you sit down with me at the table? I think it takes a lot more moral courage to say, I actually might be wrong, but I want to try to articulate for you how I'm feeling, and I really would appreciate some feedback from you about that so that we can find together some common ground. I think that's brave. It's brave
do
to
too.
admit that we
I do too.
don't
And
wanna
it takes
fight.
time.
It does.
It takes time. And that's something that right now, these days, we don't give ourselves a lot of.
Exactly.
So the culture of instant gratification also, I think, works against the permission that we give ourselves to be morally courageous. One of the conversations you and I had before we ascended the stage is about who is capable of having moral courage. And you and I agree that we're all, I'm sorry, I forgot to turn off my cell phone. We'll just let it be.
It's playing beautiful
It's
harp
beautiful,
music.
beautiful,
Yeah.
exactly. I turned off the crickets and, replaced it with a harp. But you and I agree that everybody is capable of moral courage.
But not everybody exhibits,
Yeah, and one of the hard truths that I've had to come to terms with, I don't like it. It doesn't make for, a spellbinding narrative, but it's my experience, is that most of us aren't willing to work at it. Because not only is it scary, but also because it's easier to have a feel-good moment in which you say, Reverend Jacqui, you inspire me. Okay, who doesn't want to be told that, right? It's very nice. You say it, she smiles, it's all
smiles.
good.
She thinks she-
But it's not all good. As I've learned, by having so many people say to me, you inspire me. These days, when I know I'm not going to come off sounding like a rhymes with rich, I take people by the shoulders and I say, don't tell that to me right now. Email me a month from now and tell me what you're doing with this moment of inspiration. Okay? Can I get your promise? I say, can I get your pledge? Oh, yes. Yes. Good point. Yes. No. 9.8 times out of 10, never hear back.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that 9.8 times out of 10, they're doing nothing. Maybe they are doing something or continuing to reflect on the challenge and figuring out what is it that I can do that will have meaning for me. And there are times when I hear through the grapevine, so-and-so took action, so-and-so, read your book and has done this in his or her life. Wonderful. But the reality remains that moral courage is work, because it's not just standing up. It is also, longer term, reaching out.
Absolutely, that's right.
Okay.
And
So how
yeah,
many of
how do
us
you do
are
that?
willing to do that
Yeah.
work? And can I
takes
just say
a
one
lot,
other thing?
please, of
Just
course.
because I need to pull God into this. I feel the need to, not just because we're here, but because every day, folks, every day without fail, I think to myself two things. One, can God really be proud of his creation today? And then the other thing that comes to mind is that if God has infinite patience with my mediocrity, who am I not to have infinite patience with the people whom I'm challenging. And that brings me back to a conundrum.
Yeah.
No tidy conclusion to this. The conundrum is, if God can have infinite patience, we, I just heard you say, cannot. So,
Yeah, I said
where,
Yeah, I said that.
where does one, and we'll talk more about this tomorrow, by the way, in the 9 a.m. session that I'm having with Bob Chase from Intersections, which is about the truth teller's dilemma. Can courage and compassion coexist? How much courage, but how much compassion? And I remain mystified by the answer, if there is one. I tie myself into knots every day over this.
Yeah.
So help me and help us.
I love the way you are happy to say we might not have the answer. I'm taking a stab at my answer right now,
Absolutely.
which is an emerging answer. It's not my answer last week or
Right.
2 days ago.
Right.
But in a recent staff meeting, I was talking to my staff about how I'm changing so we can all change. Because I'm a leader, right?
That's right.
And my stuff leaks out. It just does. And I'm changing so we can all change. When I got here 10 years ago, I thought leading this place meant a willing smile, still does, patiently waiting for people to behave in better ways. No longer means that. And in order to hold the congregation together through the big transition from my predecessor to me, I just was like, okay, whatever you're doing, I'm going to try to love it. Well, that's not that healthy. And it's actually not honest.
Exactly.
It's really not honest. A community of faith, however it's shaped, if it's shaped by really strong ethical humanism, if it's shaped by a commitment to the environment, if it's shaped by the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, if it's shaped by, good Beatles music, a community of faith has to be honest about what its values are and what its norms are. And one of the things that shifted in me is if I act like everything goes and everything goes, then people don't know what the boundaries are. And they don't know what is good for us and bad for us. And I have really shifted the way I handle when I see something that doesn't makes me comfortable.
What do you do now that you didn't do 10
I
years ago?
call foul on it now. And I try to call foul on it in loving ways. I don't say, dude, that was stupid. But I do really say, either in email or in person or in letters, more of the truth. Right. The truth has always been really important to me. But I think because I grew up in the little crazy family where, let's walk on eggshells, you learn quite quickly how to tell the truth in such a way that I used to take credit for this. My friends would say, girl, you can tell somebody the hard truth and they don't know they've been told it. Well, then was that the hard truth? Right. If they don't know? So I'll tell a story and hope that this person's, we have, let me try to disguise, one of our congregants, just very, very lovely person who's done a lot of good work in the congregation. And for the good work in the congregation, they were given a chance to do more good work in the congregation, and then more good work in the congregation. And the last good work that the person did in the congregation, they just didn't feel sufficiently thanked for. They just didn't. Now, it's very possible that they weren't sufficiently thanked from their point of view, right. But from my point of view, I basically kissed their butt, the whole time.
Showered gratitude.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I kind of apologized to this person, and they've kind of retreated. They're on a break. And they're on a break.
Retreated from the congregation?
Right.
Got it.
They're on a break. And they keep sort of emailing me and inviting me to a conversation, but they don't want to talk. And the email that's coming to me from the person is mean. It's nasty. It's unacceptable.
Right.
Wow. So the old Jacqui, 10-year-old old Jacqui, so it sounds like you're mad. Or, our basic Rogerian counseling, I sense that you would like a conversation. And what I've done with this is told some truth. I can tell that you're hurt. I can feel that you're disappointed. I understand from your point of view that we didn't get it done right, and I apologized for that. And you cannot keep sending me these notes that sound a little cranky town, and if you want to have a coffee with me, I'm happy to do it. I would not have done that 10 years ago. That feels brave to me as a congregational leader, where we've been told that we're nice and we represent God or the holy, and you tell some poor little congregant who doesn't have your power the truth.
Right.
Well, it's actually quite brave, but it's also quite important. Because if we can do that in love, not but if we can model, we're going to really try to get at the truth, then we can teach our congregants how to get at the truth. And that the truth isn't going to make us necessarily best friends with everybody, but the truth is a good river in which to swim.
What happened when you hit send on the email that said, this is unacceptable?
I felt really good.
Like what? Describe that more.
Like just authentic.
Yeah.
And that I was walking my walk. And I'm not writer. I mean, that's the bad verb form of that, but I'm doing that on purpose. I'm not more right than this person. My truth isn't more true than this person's truth. Right. But I'm not this Jesus with wavy hair. And I'm not God. Right. And I'm not always patient. And I'm not always kind. And sometimes my impatience will be exactly the way to get the thing done. My impatience makes me blog about gun control, right? My impatience makes us do an ethical spectrum. Like the characteristics of the humanity of us are the gifts that were given by the universe to do the work of healing the universe. Does that make sense?
More than makes sense.
Yeah.
What happened with the other person?
There's been some silence.
After receiving that email?
And that's okay.
To this day, there's silence?
Yeah, it was just 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
I'm okay with it.
Yep. Yep.
If it's a year, I might jump back out there a little bit and see what is happening.
Is it okay, in your view, if you never hear from this person again, is it okay for you not to jump back in, to just let it go?
It is okay if I never hear from this person again. But in a year, because of the way our system is set up, they'll hear from me again, because that's what we do when we haven't seen you for a year.
Got it.
Right? So that's not chasing them down, that's what we do.
Right.
That's how we do it. And that's important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. At this point, and before we open it up to everybody in the pews, I'd like to show you just one final story from Moral Courage TV.
That'd be awesome.
This is about a rabbi in Brooklyn. He is an ultra-Orthodox leader, and you will see that he truly is a leader. One of the questions that arises from a story like this is, can you be a leader without having a visible following? Now, I didn't say following. I said a visible following. I'll quickly tell you that, of course, it'll be explained in the story, but just to give you some context right off the top, this Hasidic rabbi, so ultra-Orthodox rabbi, has started a hotline for survivors of sexual abuse within the Hasidic community, children especially. You'll see how he is treated by other Hasids in his community. But again, there's a big reveal at the end. Let's roll.
Boys used to come and tell me that they go to the ritual bath, they're being sodomized. Girls used to tell me that their father sleeps with them. They say it's modest not to talk about it.
And pedophiles do exist, it's true, and it's out there.
My name is Rabbi Nochem Rosenberg. I have a hotline, and I'm trying to expose every loophole that these pedophiles do to use our children. These rabbis, they used to come out with different literature saying that because we are a Jewish nation, we're not supposed to be an informer. So I went to Israel, and I got big sages from Israel. It's a full book in Hebrew, and everybody wrote that not only is it not being an informer by going to the police, it is also mandatory for a Jewish person to go to the police. In the beginning, I used to receive every night threats. You are the worst person for the Jewish people. Here's a picture supposed to be my face. It says here to cut my head off, They said they were going to burn the house down. They threw rocks. Throw a picture of him as well. See, this is the intimidation. You live here like in 1930 in communist Russia where you can't say anything that's bothering you. It was my intention, after suffering so much, to just leave the community to another Jewish community. But the people who are with me quietly, these people told me, if you're going to leave, the pedophiles will become stronger. You can't make everybody quiet. So the parents are realizing that, yes, the rabbi was right. Rabbi Rosenberg was right for doing what he did. I didn't believe it's going to be with such a resistance, but I feel very good, and everybody should do the same. You should remember, if you do righteousness, God will be with you the whole time. I am Rabbi Nochem Rosenberg, and I am moral courage.
The thing that I love most about that story, and it makes me smile every time, is his smile at the very end. It wasn't forced. It was so natural, so organic. He was taking such pleasure in the fact that not only have parents told him that, Rabbi, you are doing the right thing, but even more, that there is a community of younger people who are pleading with him, have pled with him. He has happily accepted their request to stay within the community, because if you don't, the pedophiles will become that much stronger. So, you know, in leadership literature, one of the big questions always is, are you a leader if you don't have a visible following? And we know that if you role model moral courage, you may not, in fact, you probably won't get a flock of people surrounding you, applauding you and patting you on the back. But we also know that others are watching. And if you can show that it's possible to take a stand in the face of backlash, that possibility will be seen, will be witnessed by others. So you actually don't know the impact that you're having on others. And I'll say one other thing about this, because I think, again, in this congregation, it's important to point this out or mention it at the very least. One of my heroes, apart from the person with whom I'm sharing this stage, is a woman named Lillian Smith. Anybody ever heard of her? Hands up. Yeah, a couple people? You have? That's about two more than I ever see in other audiences. Lillian Smith ought to be a household name in this country. In the 1930s and 40s, she was an active anti-segregationist in the US South. She was white, she was a woman. And she did what she had to do because she felt it was morally just to speak up for an end to segregation, racial segregation, not just incrementalism, not just gradualism. Now, she was called by many liberals, not just conservatives, liberals at the time, a radical and extremist and so forth. She held firm to her arguments. Somebody who was taught by those arguments is a man we all know of, Martin Luther King Jr. She never knew it, but she was one of his teachers. Now, why is this kind of an interesting fact? Because at the very least, it puts a lie to the statement made by a lot of progressives today that you'll never understand somebody who doesn't look like you. That you can't understand my reality as a Muslim woman. You can't comment because you don't represent. Well, Miss Lillian, as she was known, represented with her human values She didn't represent with her skin color. She didn't represent with her gender, that is, represent Martin Luther King Jr., but she represented him with the humanity of her values. And so, again, I think it brings us back to that, critical point that, first of all, we can't assume anything about anybody else. We can't assume that because Rabbi Rosenberg is a Hasidic Jew, that he will never be critical of practices within his own community.
Right.
Number one. Number two, we can't also assume that somebody who lives a different reality because of the way power is distributed in this and other countries cannot see your reality.
And be an ally.
And to be an ally,
Right.
precisely right.
Yep, exactly.
And finally, to top it all off, we cannot assume that your willingness to exhibit moral courage, as lonely as it might be, isn't truly inspiring others to action. It might not see it in your lifetime, but as we all know from Scripture as much as anything else, anything worthwhile doing doesn't happen in a lifetime.
And I want to close with this, Irshad.
Yep.
So grateful for you that I actually have seen the fruit of my moral courage in this congregation. I have seen the fruit of, I'm looking at my friend Sierra, who was hurt by a couple of morally courageous decisions I had to make. And then she said to me, I can see now exactly why you did that. I
Now,
think
how cool is that of Sierra?
Oh my God.
So cool.
And some of the young adults in the room say they come to Middle because of the way we kind of do our bold ministry, the bravery, the moral courage it takes to stand up and stand out for justice. But more than that, I think I can feel inside myself, and this is my message to all of the leaders in the room, and that's all of you, that the personal is the place, like God starts with us, I've said that to you before. There is no God to talk about, there's no humanism, there's no theology that's not articulated except that it starts with us. It comes from God, but the words come out of our mouths. The actions come out of our bodies. It's our hands and our feet. So we are the first interpreter of all of the stuff that we need to do to make justice happen. If we are not going to be brave, then we are going to constrict, like that spandex I talked about, the flow of the power. And so I'm wanting to say to all of us, it starts with personal, it starts with our family relationships, it moves to our congregations, and then it moves to the world, this place where moral courage inspires us to
And is
speak truth
therefore
to power.
is eminently doable,
Eminently doable.
eminently manageable.
At one dinner table,
one relationship,
over one glass of wine
or mango juice.
or mango juice. We can make it happen. We can make it happen. Thank you, Irshad.